Guys, today's story is so terrifying, so unsettling that I actually got chills down my spine while recording it. I'm not kidding. This one messed with my head. If you love dark, creepy stories that stay with you long after they end, then trust me, you'll want to watch till the very last second. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and stay till the end. It really helps the channel and means a lot. All right, take a deep breath, because this one is truly disturbing. Let's begin. "20 years ago, my grandma wanted me to kill my baby sister. Now I know the truth. My grandma moved in with us when my sister was 3 months old. She was only 72, but was very frail with terrible arthritis and osteoporosis. She had taken a nasty tumble in her 2-story flat, which gave my mother quite a fright, and so it was decided she could not live on her own anymore. I was thrilled. I had been an only child until I was 9, and so when my sister was born, it was a real shock to my little world. My grandma seemed to be the only one who noticed how badly this affected me, and so when she came to live with us, she poured all her attention on me. At first, it was everything I needed. A loving adult in my life who cared about more than just the tiny, wailing baby who had taken my parents away from me. Before my grandma's arthritis had gotten too bad and her fingers became bony and gnarled, she'd been a wonderful knitter. She'd wear the colorful, cozy sweaters with deep pockets she had knitted. And ever since I could remember, whenever I saw her, she'd call me over and say in a sing-song voice, "There's something in my pocket for you." And she'd smile mischievously and angle her hip for me to reach into her pocket, and I'd find a piece of candy, and she'd wink, and I'd smile up at her. On the day she arrived to live with us, this was the first thing she did. She barely nodded in my baby sister's direction as I shoveled a candy bar into my mouth. For the first few weeks, everything was as normal as could be. It felt like my sister cried nonstop, and my parents fussed over her nonstop. But with my grandma there to fuss over me, I stopped caring so much. The first time something strange happened, at the time I wasn't even sure if something strange had happened. I was sitting in the living room with my grandma. She had been telling me stories of when she had been my age, and I was absolutely enthralled. I had been told that I was very much like my grandma when she was a little girl, and so I imagined myself in her stories, and it made me feel even closer to her. My mother came into the room holding the baby, who wasn't crying for a change, and asked if I'd like to hold her. My mom would do this from time to time in an effort to push a closeness between me and my sister that I simply wasn't interested in. "Go on, sit next to Grandma and I'll put her on your lap." I let out a big sigh, but decided not to argue, for the sake of getting it over and done with, so it could get back to just me and Grandma. I plonked down next to her, and my mom put my sister on my lap and told us not to move as she rushed to get the camera. Even though I was only 9 at the time, there wasn't much of a height difference between my grandma and I, mostly due to my grandma's severely curved spine, and so her mouth was right next to my ear. Her breathing started to get ragged, and when I turned to look at her, she was staring down at my sister with the strangest look in her eyes. "Give her a squeeze," she said very softly. I wasn't really holding my sister as much as I was sitting stiffly with her across my lap, so I shifted and adjusted my arms into a bit more of an embrace. My grandma's breathing got more and more uneven. "Squeeze her," she said in an excited whisper. She was positively vibrating next to me, her voice getting louder as she repeated, "Squeeze her! Squeeze her! Squeeze her!" She opened and closed her crooked, talon-like hands in anticipation. I had never seen her like this, and it scared me. And this is the part I can't be sure of because my mom came back into the room with the camera poised to take a picture. But I swear I heard my grandma say, "Squish it," in an awful guttural moan before the flash went off. I didn't give much thought to this incident, and after a while it faded out of thoughts altogether. It seemed quite odd to me that my grandma really didn't seem to want anything to do with sister, but I wasn't going to question it, not since it meant I got all her attention. My parents didn't notice at all. At least, they didn't push her to hold the baby, or join in on bath times, or read her a story the same way they did with me. After a while, things in the house settled into a routine where I'd spend all my time with my grandma and my parents would spend all their time with my sister. One night, a few months after my grandma came to live with us, I woke up in the middle of the night. Now, no one gets much sleep in a house with a baby in it, but I had gotten pretty used to it by then, and I even managed to sleep through my sister's wailing. But this isn't what woke me up. A floorboard had creaked outside my door. I listened and heard another soft creak. Someone was walking down the hallway, trying not to make a noise. The creaking stopped, and I could tell someone was standing outside my sister's room, which was across from mine and a little ways down. I listened, thinking it was likely one of my parents checking on my sister, but there were no more sounds. I got out of bed to see who it was and what they were doing. The hallway was darker than my dimly nightlight lit room, and so it took me a while to adjust to the darkness. But when I did, I saw the crouched and crooked form of my grandma just standing outside the closed door. She wasn't moving, but I could hear her ragged, uneven breathing. I must have made a noise because she whipped her head around to see me standing half in my doorway and then scuttled away faster than I had ever seen her move before, past me in the hallway and back into her own room. I felt a mixture of fear and jealousy, unsure of what had just happened, a subconscious knowing that it wasn't right, but also a bit put out that my grandma was paying attention to my sister after all. It didn't help that she started doing this every night after that. I'd hear her soft, deliberately quiet footsteps go past my door and then stop outside my sister's. I don't know how long she'd stay there because I never heard the footsteps go past my door again. As strange as it was, things would always be completely normal in the morning again. My grandma would be her usual warm and affectionate self, and we'd pick up on wherever the day before's story had left off. One day, a few weeks into my grandma coming to live with us, I was sitting with her in her room. I remember she sat in an armchair, basking in the warm rays of afternoon sun. I was going through her jewelry box, trying on her pearls and clip-on earrings. It would have been a wonderful memory if not for what happened next. My mother came in with the baby. She moaned at me for making a mess of grandma's things and asked me to watch my sister for 5 minutes while she ran over to the neighbors. I groaned and reluctantly agreed. My baby sister crawled over to me and smiled. I just scowled at her as she tried to grab the box away from me. It fell out of my hands and all the jewelry scattered across the floor. "No, Emma!" I cried. She just kept smiling and I felt tears prickling my eyes. Angry, frustrated tears over a ruined moment with my grandma. I felt a small nudge on my back and turned to see my grandma on her hands and knees behind me. Her gnarled frame making the position look so wrong as her elbows bent too far backwards and her hunched back seemingly arched into impossible propositions. She had the same manic smile on her face, her eyes wild and bulging. My grandma reached out her hand, closed around something. She slowly opened her knotted fingers to reveal a large ornate brooch and motioned for me to take it. Her smile never faded, and thick, discolored drool started dripping from the sides of her mouth. I stared at her in shock and disgust. Again, she motioned for me to take the brooch, inching her hand closer. "Emma," my grandma said in a guttural whisper, her voice deeper and more gravely than it had ever been, for Emma. In dismay, I took it from her, keeping my eyes on hers. She began bouncing on her hands in childlike excitement. "The pin," she rasped and pointed a bony finger at the baby. "Prick her! Prick her in the eye!" I stared open-mouthed at my grandma, in disbelief at her command, her wild-eyed excitement, her nearly feverish joy at the idea of me hurting my sister. "No, Grandma, I can't," I whispered. "You must! Prick! Yes, here!" She tapped the back of her skull. My grandma started bouncing on her haunches now and clapping her hands together, the gruesome smile growing wider and wider until I thought her cheeks would split. My mother yelled, and I spun my head around. She had come into the room and picked my sister up, taking something out of her mouth. "Emma could have choked on this." She held a small pearl earring. I was too stunned to speak. I turned to look back at my grandma, but she had gotten up and was back in her armchair, her face now plastered with a look of concern. That night, my parents sat me down and lectured me about keeping Emma safe and how they expected me to act more responsibly. I tried to tell them that something was wrong with Grandma, but they shut me down. My dad was so visibly frustrated, he walked out of the room and my mom's chin crumbled, and tears filled her eyes. I was sent to bed. After that, I tried to avoid my grandma, and my parents stopped trying to force me to do anything with my sister. Just as I kept away from my grandma, it seemed my parents were purposefully trying to keep me away from Emma. They exchanged anxious glances whenever I was in the same room as her. This suited me just fine in the end, having nothing to do with Emma. But the unfairness of it all, the truth that I couldn't care less about Emma, and it was my grandma who wanted to hurt her, filled me with a bubbling rage. This was 20 years ago. My grandma died shortly after the brooch incident, and I think my parents expected me to be a lot sadder than I was. Truthfully, I was relieved. I was relieved that I wouldn't hear the footsteps outside my door at night anymore, or the giggling, or see her too-wide smile and bulging eyes whenever she looked down at Emma. I could feel my grandma's unspoken urging of me to hurt my sister, and at the time I felt repulsed, horrified. My sister and I never grew close. I guess that's just something that happens with siblings sometimes. In fact, in all honesty, my dislike continued to grow for Emma through the years. Of course, I hated and resented that she got all the attention, all the concern, and when she started using in her teens, my parents found themselves in a never-ending cycle of rehab relapse, leaving my achievements unacknowledged. I graduated top of my class. I got promoted in the firm countless times and made partner at an unprecedented young age. But really, through it was all Emma. Emma. I thought about this as I sat with my mother in Emma's cold, rank apartment holding the photograph. Unsurprisingly, she OD'd a few days ago. My mother looked completely broken with grief, her hands trembling as she packed boxes full of Emma's useless junk. I can't fathom why she'd want to keep any of it. "Look at this," I said, holding the photograph out to my mother. She takes it and smiles through tears. "Your grandmother and Emma. So lovely that Emma kept this," she said. The photograph shows my grandma after she had moved in with us sitting in her armchair, the afternoon sun streaming in, just like that day. A baby Emma is pulling herself up on the armchair, her back towards the camera. "You never believed me," I said quietly as my mother scanned the picture with tremendously sad eyes. "About what, love?" she replied, not looking up. "About the things Grandma said. About the things Grandma did." My mother let out a weary sigh. "Oh, Joanne, seriously, please, this is not the time. I don't want to relive that grief while I am going through this." "What?" I yelled. "What grief?" I was the one who was grieving at no one believing me. My mother's eyes darkened. Her chest heaved. "No one believed you, Joanne, because it was utter nonsense. We thought you just had a hard time adjusting, and that's why the lies had started, but then—" She went silent. "A hard time adjusting to what?" I shouted. "To your sister. To your grandmother. To all of it. You were so close with your grandma, and after she came to live with us, we thought you just couldn't cope with it. And that's why you started making up those stories," she said sadly. "I loved that grandma came to live with us. At first, it meant someone finally paid some attention to me. I finally had someone to talk to." My mother let out a cynical chuckle. "That's what I'm talking about, Joanne." She shook her head. "Your delusions. The idea you were talking with Grandma in the first place. After the stroke, when she came to live with us, she couldn't talk, she couldn't walk, she couldn't do anything, for God's sake." Of course, after that revelation, I had to clear my head. I felt like I was going mad. Those memories are so real, so visceral, I couldn't be making any of it up. It did happen. I know it did, just like my mother to never believe me. But Emma, on the other hand, the drug-riddled deadbeat who drained them of their energy, their finances, everything. I began to think that maybe I should have listened to my grandma then, that I should have hurt Emma when she was still a baby. Maybe everything would be different now. It would mean that I wouldn't have had to leave my sister's apartment, fighting back tears only to find myself walking alone along a desolate path on the river's edge. It would mean that I wouldn't have had to lift up the loose floorboard in Emma's apartment and retrieve the real needle, still with remnants of the rat poison mixture in it, that the cops didn't bother looking for, since they were happy that the one sticking out her blue, cold arm had caused an overdose. And it would certainly mean I wouldn't have to look over my shoulder to make sure no one was around to see me throwing it into the river.